I still remember the night they tried to throw me out of my own mansion. It was raining heavily. I had just come back from a routine checkup, weak and tired, leaning on my walking stick. But before I could even step inside, my daughter-in-law, Sana, blocked the doorway with a folded umbrella and a sour, irritated look on her face. "You shouldn't come here without calling first," she snapped. "This isn't your house anymore. You need to understand that." I froze. My own house. The house I built brick by brick, room by room. The house where my children took their first steps. The house where my wife and I spent 40 years together. Before I could speak, my son, Adil, appeared behind her. He didn't even meet my eyes. "Abu, we just think you should rest somewhere else. You're old now, and honestly," he exhaled sharply, "managing this big place is not for you anymore." I felt a sharp sting in my chest, not from age, not from illness, but from the betrayal dripping from his tone, like I was some burden, some guest, some outsider. Sana crossed her arms. "We already talked to the lawyer. Just sign the papers. The house will be safe with us." Her words hit me harder than the rain. Sign the papers. Papers I had never seen. Papers they had prepared behind my back. Papers that would transfer everything. My mansion, my land, my savings, under their name. And the worst part, they weren't even embarrassed. Not a trace of guilt. Not a moment of hesitation. Just greed. Cold and shameless. My voice trembled, not from weakness, but from hurt. "So, you want the mansion?" They didn't deny it. They didn't flinch. They didn't even pretend to love me in that moment. Adil simply said, "Yes, it's better this way." And something inside me snapped. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I simply stepped back, holding onto the railing to keep myself steady, and whispered, "Fine. If a house is worth more than a father to you, then let's see who ends up living in it." At that moment, they didn't know. They had already lost everything, including the mansion, because 2 weeks later, I gave it to someone who actually cared for me, my nurse, and that's where the real story begins. The rain that night felt heavier than usual, almost as if the sky itself was warning me, telling me not to take another step forward, but I didn't listen. I walked up the porch slowly, using my walking stick to steady myself. My knees had been hurting all week, and the doctor insisted I rest more, but rest becomes impossible when your own home stops feeling like home. As soon as I reached the doorway, I saw her, Sana, my daughter-in-law. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even pretending. She held an umbrella in one hand, but she didn't move it to help me. Instead, she looked straight at me with those cold, calculating eyes. "You can't just come here like this," she said sharply. "We told you to call before showing up." I blinked, confused. "Call? This is my house." Her lips twisted into a smirk. "That's debatable." Before I could process her words, Adil stepped behind her. My son, my own flesh and blood. He looked tired, annoyed, as if my arrival was a burden he wanted to avoid. "Abu, we've talked about this," he muttered when I asked softly. "Every time you show up without warning," he said, avoiding my eyes. I felt the rain soaking into my clothes, cold and stinging, but his words hurt far deeper. They weren't just pushing me away. They were pushing me out. "Abu, managing this big house isn't for you anymore," Adil said. "You should live somewhere smaller, somewhere simpler, somewhere out of their way." That's what he meant. Sana stepped forward, waving a folded paper in her hand. "Just sign this," she said casually, as if it was some delivery form. "We talked to the lawyer. After you sign, we can take over the house. You won't need to worry anymore." Worry? I wasn't worried. I was heartbroken. My voice cracked. "You want me to sign the house over to you?" Sana shrugged. "It's not safe in your name. You're old. Anything could happen." I felt something inside me collapse. Not physically, emotionally. Betrayal was sharp, sudden, and merciless. My own children saw me not as their father, but as an obstacle they needed to remove. And then came the line that burned itself into my memory forever. "You don't belong here anymore," Sana whispered. "Just accept it." The rain thundered behind her. The world felt like it was collapsing, piece by piece. I stepped back, slowly, quietly, holding the railing so I wouldn't fall. "Fine," I said, voice barely audible. "If a house means that much to you, let's see how far you're willing to go." They didn't know then. I had already made up my mind. Before the storm, both the real one and the emotional one, my life looked normal from the outside. People always envied my family, 2 grown children settled in life. "You're blessed," my friends would say. If only they knew the truth, my son, Adil, was never a bad person, just weak, easily influenced. He wasn't always like that. As a child, he would cling to my arm everywhere we went. But years passed, responsibilities grew, and then he married Sana. And Sana, she was a queen in her mind, elegant, smart, but sharp, tongued and greedy. She wanted control of everything, the house, the money, the decisions, even the future. And Adil, he listened to every word she said. My daughter, Alina, lived in another city. a good girl at heart but distant. She visited rarely, always busy with her corporate job. She loved me, but she didn't see what was happening inside the house. She didn't see the slow decay, the respect slipping away day by day. Then there was Maria, my nurse, or as Sana liked to call her, the outsider. Maria was with me almost every day. She cooked for me when my hands trembled. She reminded me of my medicines. She talked to me when loneliness tried to drown me. She wasn't just a nurse. She was the only person who looked at me like I still mattered. One afternoon, while I rested in the living room, I overheard Sana and Adil talking in the kitchen. He trusts that nurse too much. Sana hissed. Adil sighed. She's just doing her job. Exactly, a job. But your father, he treats her like family. So what if she starts influencing him? What if she becomes part of his will? I still feel the chill that ran through my spine at that moment. They weren't worried about my health. They weren't worried about my comfort. They were worried about their inheritance. That day, I realized something horrifying. Sana wasn't manipulating the situation. She was manipulating my son, and she was planning something with the property. I didn't say anything at that time, but I listened and I remembered every word. I was starting to see the cracks, the disrespect, the greed hidden beneath polite voices and fake smiles, but I had no idea. The worst was yet to come. Things started changing gradually, like rust quietly eating away at metal. It began with simple comments. You forget things too much. You're getting old. You can't handle finances anymore. Small stings, almost unnoticeable, but they were building a pattern. Then they began checking my drawers, my documents, my bank statements. They would pretend they were helping, but I knew better. They were searching for something, or maybe making sure I didn't change anything. One morning, I caught Sana inside my study room going through my files. What are you doing? I asked sharply. She didn't even flinch, just cleaning. You have too many papers lying around. Cleaning. Since when did she clean anything? Later that evening, Adil sat next to me on the sofa. His tone was soft, too soft. Abu, don't you think it's time to let me handle the property matters? I frowned. Why? He hesitated. Because, you're not as strong as before. I wanted to tell him strength isn't measured by age. Strength is measured by character, and his was fading. The final straw came the day they invited me for dinner, not at the table, but in the corner of the kitchen, almost like I was some extra burden they needed to place somewhere. Sana placed a plate in front of me and said, "We're eating in the dining room. You stay here. The kids need space." Kids, they were adults. What space did they need from their own father? I sat alone, staring at my food. And for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home, but the real blow came a week later. Sana and Adil sat across from me, looking unusually serious. "We need you to sign something," Adil said. "What is it?" "Some papers, just routine documents." Routine documents don't require hiding eye contact. Routine documents don't come in sealed envelopes. Routine documents aren't pushed into your hand with nervous smiles. I opened the file and felt my heart plummet. It was a property transfer document. They were trying to take everything, my home, my land, my savings, my future, and they expected me to sign it quietly. I looked up at them slowly. Why would you do this to me? And neither answered, because their silence was the answer, and in that moment, I realized something dangerous was happening behind my back, something I needed to uncover. I stared at the property papers in disbelief. Every line, every paragraph was neatly typed, with little spaces already marked for my signature. They didn't even hide the fact that they had planned this well in advance. "Abu, don't make this difficult," Adil said, tapping the document with his finger. "It's just a safety measure. We want to protect the house." "Protect the house from me." I pushed the file away. "I'm not signing anything unless I know exactly what it is." Sana leaned forward, her tone dripping with impatience. "Why are you being so stubborn? You're not young anymore. If something happens to you, the estate will get stuck in legal mess. Just sign it and let us handle things." Her words sounded rehearsed, practiced, as if she'd been waiting to recite them. I looked at Adil, my son, my boy who once held my hand crossing roads, and searched his face for empathy, but all I found was pressure. "Abu." He said softly, "We're doing this for you." For me, I laughed bitterly. "Or for yourselves." Neither spoke. The silence answered everything. Just then, Maria entered the room carrying tea. She sensed the tension immediately. Her eyes landed on the documents, then on my trembling hands. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. "No." Sana snapped. "It's a family matter. Stay out of it." Maria didn't argue, but she didn't leave either. She simply placed the tray down and stood behind me. A quiet but powerful gesture. She wasn't going to let them corner me. That angered Sana even more. "Why do you always have her around?" She spat. "She's just a nurse, not family. She cares for me." I said, "That's more than I can say for some people." Adil exhaled sharply. "Abu, please, just sign the papers." "No." The word came out firm, unwavering, surprising even myself. Sana's posture stiffened, her eyes darkened. "If you don't trust us." She muttered coldly, "Then you should think about where you're going to live when things change." It was the closest thing to a threat she had made so far. I felt the ground beneath me shift. This wasn't about care. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't even about family anymore. It was about ownership. Control, power, and they were willing to push me into a corner until I broke. But I wouldn't break, not yet, because deep inside, a warning bell was ringing louder than ever. After I refused to sign, the atmosphere in the house changed completely. The smiles disappeared, the greetings stopped, the conversations turned cold and forced. I felt like an intruder walking through hallways I had built myself. Then came the next phase of their plan, lies. One afternoon, Adil sat beside me again, this time holding an older file. "Abu," he began carefully, "do you remember the will you made years ago?" "Of course," I said. "Your mother and I wrote it together." "Well," he hesitated, exchanging a glance with Sana. "It's outdated. It doesn't reflect today's needs." I narrowed my eyes. "What needs?" Sana placed her hand on Adil's shoulder. "You left everything equally to both children, but Alina doesn't need anything. She barely visits. We're the ones taking care of you. We're the ones who stayed. They wanted the reward for simply existing in the same house. You should update the will." Sana continued, "Leave the house to Adil. It makes more sense." I felt my stomach twist. "You already checked my will. We were just trying to help," she said defensively. "Help, no." They were digging, searching, plotting. I said nothing. I simply closed the file and placed it aside. That evening, when I sat in the garden to catch some air, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my lawyer, Kashif, a man I had trusted for years. "Call me urgently. There have been attempts to access your legal files." My heart dropped. Attempts? By whom? I didn't need to ask. When I called him, his voice was tense. "Sir, someone contacted my office pretending to be you. They asked for copies of your will." The world seemed to tilt for a moment. "Who?" I whispered. "We traced the number." He said, "It belongs to your son." I closed my eyes. It hurt, more deeply than I expected. "And that's not all," Kashif continued. "Someone also asked if you had any other property under your name. Someone other than your children. Other property, other ownership, other inheritance. They were checking if I had left something out. Something they could grab, something they were afraid of losing." Kashif's voice softened. "Sir, something strange is happening. You need to be careful." I felt a wave of sickness wash over me. My own son had pretended to be me, to get access to my will, so he could change or control what belonged to me. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to imagine him capable of such a thing. But reality doesn't ask for permission. I ended the call with trembling fingers, and I knew one thing with painful clarity. This wasn't just greed anymore. It was betrayal, calculated and intentional. I needed to protect myself, and the first step was to meet Kashif. I waited 3 days before meeting Kashif, not because I was afraid of my family discovering it. No, I was afraid of discovering how far they had gone. Maria insisted on coming with me. "You shouldn't travel alone," she said. "Your blood pressure has been high." I agreed, and silently I was grateful. Her presence gave me a strange sense of strength. When we reached Kashif's office, he looked worried, more than usual. He closed the door, lowered his voice, and handed me a folder. "This," he said, "is everything we found. Inside were copies of calls, requests, and messages from Adol, all pretending to be me, all trying to gain access to my documents. And then Kashif took out another envelope, thicker, sealed, and marked with my name. "What's this?" I asked. "This," he said slowly, "is something I prepared years ago, a precaution, a private will that you signed when your wife passed away. You asked me to keep it hidden unless I felt you were in danger." My breath caught in my throat. I had forgotten. Back then, when grief clouded everything, I had made a second will, one that only Kashif and I knew about, a will written with fear and instinct, a will that protected the mansion until my children were emotionally mature. He slid it toward me. "You still own everything fully," he said. "They have no legal claim, and they won't, unless you choose to give it." I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I wasn't powerless. Sadness that I needed protection from my own children. Kashif leaned in. "Sir, you need to update your documents. They are planning something. Maybe more than just pressuring you." "More?" I asked. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Someone visited my office last week, asking how quickly a property transfer could be processed. If the owner was, let's say, unable to make decisions, unable, my heart froze. Are you saying—" "I don't know," he interrupted. "But you must act before they do." Maria placed her hand gently on my shoulder. "You're not alone," she whispered. Her words hit deeper than she knew. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Support. Kashif cleared his throat. "Sir, you have a choice. Either update your will again, or leave everything exactly as it is, but whatever you do, don't sign anything they give you." I nodded slowly. Then I asked the question burning inside me. "Kashif, in that hidden will, who is the primary beneficiary?" He looked at me for a long moment. "It's still your decision," he said carefully, "but the will includes a clause that your assets go to the person who has taken care of you with loyalty in your final years." I froze. There was only one person that described Maria, and suddenly everything inside me shifted. My family wanted the mansion, but maybe someone else had earned it. Kashif added quietly, "You don't need to decide now, but you will soon." And I knew he was right. The battle for my home wasn't over. It was just beginning. The ride home from Kashif's office felt heavier than any journey I had taken in my life. The envelope containing the secret will lay in my lap, its weight far greater than a few sheets of paper. It held answers and consequences. Maria noticed my silence. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, but truthfully, I was anything but okay. Once I reached my room, I locked the door and sat at my desk. The rain outside tapped against the windows like a warning. Like déjà vu of that night they tried to push me out. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. The will was simple, clear, and brutally honest. It stated that as long as I was alive and mentally sound, every property, every bank account, every asset would remain solely under my name, not shared, not divided, not transferred. Everything belonged to me until I decided otherwise. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but then I saw something that made my breath stall, a separate page, a clause I had forgotten completely. In the event that the children do not demonstrate care, loyalty, or respect toward the testator, the inheritance shall be transferred to the individual who has provided genuine care. I closed my eyes. There it was, the truth, the clause my younger self had written with a broken heart after losing my wife. Back then, I feared one thing, dying alone, unprotected, and now I was living that fear. I could hear footsteps outside. Then Adol's voice, "Abu, are you in there?" I quickly slid the will back into the envelope and tucked it into the drawer. "Yes." I called out, steadying my voice. The door opened a little as Adol peeked inside. "Sana made dinner. Come eat." Dinner after everything, after the pressure, the threats, the lies. I swallowed the anger building inside me. "I'm not hungry," I said. He hesitated. Are you upset with us?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to say yes, I'm upset. You betrayed me, but I didn't. Because now I needed to observe. To plan, to act, no. I lied softly. I just need rest. He nodded slowly and left. The moment the door closed, I turned back to the drawer. The secret will had confirmed one thing. My family had no idea I still had full control. No idea the mansion was untouchable. No idea that the inheritance rules could favor someone else entirely. And if they found out, this house would become a battlefield. I took a deep breath. This was no longer about papers. This was about truth, and truth was about to explode right in their faces. The next day, I returned to Kashif's office to collect an additional document he had mentioned, a property deed. He said it was important. I didn't know why until I saw it. I sat down across from him at the table. He handed me a thick, yellowed folder. "This is the original deed to your mansion," he said. I looked at him, confused. I thought the copies at home were enough. He shook his head. "Not when someone is trying to seize your property illegally." Illegally, the word struck me like lightning. I opened the folder and read the document carefully. The property wasn't registered under a shared trust. It wasn't under joint ownership. It wasn't even partially linked to my children. It was mine, only mine, 25 years ago. Kashif explained, "Your wife insisted that the house remain in your name alone. She feared family disputes in the future." My heart ached at the memory of her. My wife, my companion, the only person who truly understood me. She was right. I whispered. Kashif leaned forward. "This deed is your shield, if they try anything. Pressuring you, forcing you to sign, or attempting fraud. You can stop them instantly." Fraud. The word lingered heavily in the air. I remembered Sana's voice. "Just sign the papers. You don't belong here anymore." They were ready to push me out, maybe even make me appear mentally unfit. Maybe worse. What if they try again? I asked. Kashif smiled faintly. "Then I'll step in. But sir, the decision about your will is still yours. If you want to protect yourself and the property, you must name someone trustworthy as beneficiary." I knew who that was. But I wasn't ready to say it yet. Maria waited outside. She looked up when she saw me and immediately sensed my mood. "Did something happen?" she asked. I handed her the folder. "This house. It belongs to me alone." She nodded gently. "It always did, but they want it." I whispered. "They want it so badly they're willing to twist the law." Maria sighed. "Greed makes people blind. Blind, cold, heartless." I felt a quiet fire ignite inside me. A fire I hadn't felt in months. When we reached home, I walked through the gate slowly, deliberately, knowing something they didn't. This mansion wasn't slipping from my hands. It wasn't theirs to claim. It never was, and now I held proof. But the real confrontation was yet to come, and I was ready for it. 2 days later, everything erupted. I was sitting in the living room reading when the doorbell rang. Sana opened it, expecting a parcel or a visitor. Instead, it was a courier holding a large envelope addressed to her and Adil. She frowned. "What is this?" "I'm not sure," the courier said. "Signature required." She signed and took the envelope inside. I didn't say anything. I simply watched. Adil joined her. Together, they tore it open. Inside was a letter from Kashif. But not just one letter, 3 documents, a legal warning, a court notice, and a statement of property rights. Sana read the first page and immediately turned pale. What is this?" she gasped. Adil grabbed the papers, scanning them quickly. His hands began to shake. "Abu, what did you do?" he whispered. I placed my glasses on the table and looked at them calmly. "I did what I should have done long ago." Sana stepped forward, her voice trembling. This says we attempted coercion, because you did." I replied quietly. "In this," she pointed at another document, "this says the house isn't ours. It says it belongs fully to you." "That's correct," I said. "It always has." Adil's face fell. But we thought, you thought." I interrupted, "that an old man wouldn't know his own rights." Sana's voice rose. "This letter says if we try anything again, the court will take action against us. Legal action." I didn't flinch, not anymore. "I warned you." I said. "I told you not to force me." They stared at me in shock. Not guilt, not sorrow, shock, because they hadn't expected me to fight back. They thought I would bend, break, give up, but they didn't know one thing. A father may be soft, but he is not weak. "You went behind our back," Sana hissed. "No," I said. "You went behind mine. I simply protected what was mine." Adil sank into the sofa, hands on his head. "Abu, what happens now?" I stood slowly. "Now," I said, "the truth comes out. The house stays with me, and every step you take from this moment will decide your place in my life." They stared at me, speechless. But deep inside their eyes, I saw something new. Fear, because they knew. They had lost their advantage. Their plan had collapsed. Their greed had been exposed, and the fight wasn't over. Not yet, because I still had one more card to play. The morning I decided to reclaim my house, the sky was strangely calm, as if the world knew a storm was about to start, but I was finally ready for it. I woke up before sunrise, called the locksmith I had arranged secretly, and waited in the living room while he worked on the main door. Each metallic click echoed in my chest like a heartbeat, strong, steady, determined. The locksmith finished in 15 minutes. New locks, sir. No old key will work. Perfect, I said, my voice colder than I intended. By the time the sun climbed toward the sky, I felt something inside me shift. No fear, no guilt, no hesitation, only clarity around 10 a.m. I heard loud banging on the gate. Bang, bang, bang. Then the yelling started. Abu opened the door. It was Danish, shouting like a man who suddenly realized his control had slipped through his fingers. Ayesha's shrill voice followed. What the hell did you do to the locks? Open this right now. This is our house. I walked slowly to the window and pulled the curtain aside. They were standing outside, disheveled, panicked, furious. I opened the window just enough for my voice to pass. This is my house, and I'm taking it back. Ayesha pointed a finger at me. You're insane. You can't do this. I didn't answer her. Instead, I looked at my son. He wasn't shouting anymore. His eyes were wet, his face pale. He stepped closer to the window. Dad, he said quietly, please, open the door. Let's talk. For a moment, my heart softened. I saw my little boy again, the child who used to run into my arms after school. But then I remembered the papers, the lies, the betrayal. Talk. I whispered. You only wanted my signatures, not my words. His lips trembled. I'm sorry. The apology felt real, or maybe he was just desperate because he had lost control. Behind him, Ayesha yelled, stop begging him. We can force our way in. I stepped back from the window. I didn't want to see them anymore, not the anger, not the tears, not the manipulation. I locked the window and walked away slowly, my footsteps echoing through the halls of the home I had reclaimed. Outside, their voices grew louder, more chaotic, more desperate. But I didn't open the door. Not that day, not after everything they had done. Yet one question stayed with me. By evening, the shouting had stopped. The gate lay silent, the air heavy with unsaid words. I made myself tea and sat on the veranda, staring at the driveway that once carried laughter, guests, and celebrations. Now it held only ghosts. Around sunset, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching the gate. Slow, hesitant, it was Danish. He didn't knock this time. He didn't yell. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the ground like a child about to confess to a crime. I opened the window slightly. What now? He looked up, and for the first time in months, he looked like my son. Not the greedy man Ayesha shaped him into. Dad, I need to tell you the truth. I said nothing. I just waited. He swallowed hard. Ayesha. She pushed me. Everything, the papers, the lawyer, the pressure. It was all her idea. She kept telling me we deserved the house, that you didn't need it anymore. I stared at him. And you agreed. He exhaled, eyes full of shame. I was stupid. Weak. I should have stopped her. I should have protected you. A tear fell from his cheek, landing silently on the driveway. For a moment, I felt my chest tighten. Parents wish to hug their children even when hurt by them, that's our curse. But before I could speak, another car pulled up. The door opened, and Hania stepped out. Her expression was a mixture of shock, fear, and disappointment. Dad, what happened? The whole neighborhood is talking. You changed the locks. Danish and Ayesha were screaming outside all morning. I looked at my daughter carefully. Was she here to blame me, or to understand me? She walked closer. Tell me the truth. Why would you shut them out like that? I was tired, too tired to explain everything from the beginning. So I picked up the envelope that still sat on the table inside the one containing the property transfer papers they tried to trick me into signing. I handed the envelope through the window. Hania opened it, and her face drained of color. Danish, what is this? She whispered. Danish didn't answer. Tears kept falling. Hania looked at me, eyes trembling. Dad, I had no idea. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. And in that moment, standing on the other side of the gate, My children looked like strangers who were just waking up from a long nightmare. But it didn't matter, because deep inside I already knew. It was time to make sure no one could ever trap me again. Time to choose who actually deserved my home, not by blood, but by heart. The next morning I called my lawyer, the real one, the one I trusted. He arrived at the mansion with a briefcase and a calm smile. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. I looked around the living room at the walls I had painted with my wife years ago, at the furniture I bought one piece at a time, at the memories that filled every corner. "Yes," I said, "I'm sure." We sat at the dining table. He took out a fresh document, my new will, not the one my children tried to force on me, not the one filled with greed. This was mine. Name the primary beneficiary. The lawyer said. I closed my eyes for a moment and saw the face of the only person who stood by me, who warned me, who cared for me when everyone else saw me as a burden. Maria, my nurse, the one who treated me like a human being, not a wallet. I opened my eyes, give the mansion to Maria. The lawyer didn't react, he simply wrote, but the decision hit me like a wave of cold air. I had just removed my children from my will, a lifetime of work, handed to someone who earned it through pure kindness, not greed, not manipulation. When the papers were ready, I signed them slowly, firmly, feeling a strange mixture of pain and relief settle in my chest. The lawyer packed his documents. It's done. By evening, word had already spread. I was standing near the staircase when I heard the gate slam open. Danish, Heir, Ayesha, all three of them rushed inside, their faces pale, their breathing uneven. "What did you do?" Ayesha screamed. Danish stared at me speechless. Heir covered her mouth in shock. I said nothing. I simply handed them a copy of the new will. Ayesha snatched it, scanned the first page, and froze. The mansion goes to her," she whispered, her voice cracking. Heir stepped back, stunned. Danish closed his eyes, tears forming again. Their faces, their shock, their disbelief. Their silence, it was a moment I would never forget. A moment burned into my soul forever. The night after I changed the will, I sat alone in the living room, the same place where my children once laughed and played. The same place where my wife and I used to sit together, planning the future that now felt so far away. But the silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt honest. For the first time in years, there were no lies hiding behind polite smiles. No manipulation wrapped in sweet words. No pressure, no fear, no guilt. Just truth and peace. It's strange how betrayal changes you. Before all this, I thought a parent's heart could break only once, when their child cries for the first time, or when they leave home, or when they face their own failures. But I learned that a parent's heart can break again and again. Quietly, silently, without anyone noticing, but it can also heal, slowly, carefully, one breath at a time. I started waking up early again, taking morning walks in the garden Maria used to water every day. The air felt lighter, the trees looked greener, even the sunlight felt warmer, as if life itself was reminding me, you survived. Some days were harder. Some nights I stared at old photo albums and asked myself where things went wrong. Was it me? Did I give them too much, too little? Did I fail somewhere? But then I realized love is not a transaction. It's not something you can measure in money, property, or inheritance. I had given them all the love I had. I taught them values, honesty, kindness. What they chose to do with those lessons was their choice, not my failure. Maria would check on me during the day. She never asked about the will, never asked about the house. She simply made sure I was okay emotionally, not financially. And that was something I had forgotten how to receive. Pure care, no agenda, no hidden motives. One afternoon, she said gently, "Sir, betrayal hurts the deepest when it comes from family, but sometimes losing people is the only way to gain yourself back." Her words stayed with me. Betrayal had turned my world upside down, but healing had given me a new world altogether. Yet the journey wasn't over, because while I was healing, my children were preparing to confront the truth once and for all. A few days later, Danish and Heir came to the mansion again. This time there was no yelling, no threats, no arrogance in their steps. They walked in slowly like people entering a graveyard of their own mistakes. Danish spoke first. His voice was cracked. "Dad, we just want to talk." I nodded and sat down on the sofa. Maria quietly stepped aside, giving us space, but she didn't leave the room, for the first time in months. I didn't feel scared of them. I felt strong. Henia sat on the other sofa, eyes red. Dad, we were wrong, all of it. The pressure, the papers, the lawyer. We should never have treated you like that. Danish lowered his head. I don't deserve forgiveness. For a moment, I simply looked at them. My children, grown adults, successful, educated yet so lost in greed that they had forgotten the simplest value, respect. I sighed. Children forget that parents are human. We feel pain. We feel fear. But we stay quiet because we love you more than ourselves. Danish wiped his eyes. We made a terrible mistake. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence weigh on them. Then I said softly, "Tell me honestly, why did the house matter so much to you?" Hania hesitated, then whispered, "Status. Pressure. Everyone said the mansion should belong to us, that it made us look weak if it stayed under your name." I shook my head slowly. "So you cared more about society than your own father." Those words hit them harder than any punishment I could ever give. Silence filled the room for a long time. Finally, I said, "There is one lesson I want both of you to remember, for the rest of your lives." They looked up, eyes trembling. "Money comes and goes, property can be built and lost, but respect, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild." Henia started crying quietly. Danish whispered, "Dad, what can we do to fix this?" Their question was sincere. But I had already learned something even greater. You can forgive people, but you cannot unsee their true face, and while my heart softened, my mind remained steady. I had my answer, but I didn't allow myself to say it just yet, because one last truth was waiting the final consequence of their choices. The day the truth came out publicly was the day everything changed. My lawyer arrived with documents. Maria stood quietly behind him, hesitant, unsure of what was about to unfold. My children sat across from me, anxious, waiting for me to speak. I looked at all of them, the people who had shaped the last painful and powerful chapter of my life. Then I said calmly, "It's time to tell you what I've decided." Danish straightened. Hania held her breath. Ayesha, who had returned and now sat in the corner, looked ready to explode. I opened the final page of my updated will. "I have forgiven you both." I began. Their shoulders loosened. For a moment hope lit their faces, but I continued, "Forgiveness is not the same as trust." Silence, heavy, sharp, unavoidable. I took a deep breath. "This mansion, the house you tried so hard to take away, I'm giving it to someone who protected me when you tried to break me." Their eyes widened. Hania whispered, "Dad." "No." Danish's face fell. Ayesha stood up. "You can't." I raised my hand. She froze. I looked at Maria. She looked terrified. "Sir, I never asked for anything." "I know," I said softly, "and that is why you deserve it." I turned back to my children. When love is replaced by greed, you lose everything, not because someone punished you, but because you punished yourselves. The room stayed silent. No one argued, no one shouted, because deep inside they knew the truth. They had destroyed the home they wanted so badly, not me. My lawyer closed the file. It's official. Maria's eyes filled with tears, not of joy, but disbelief. She shook her head. "Sir, I will take care of this house the way you always wanted, and I will take care of you too, always." For the first time in a long time, I smiled. My children stood there stunned, speechless, small. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden once more. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about choosing peace, choosing dignity, choosing respect. I turned back to them and said my final words, the words that carried the weight of my entire story. Respect matters more than money, and now they know it too.